Okay, so let's run another league. I'm going to be running back the old Obosh list. Essentially, this is the same list as what I was on before Zendikar Rising came out, except one critical difference here. I am playing for Forgotten Caves instead of the Four Horizon lands, and I actually think these might even be better. I mean, I did just 5-0 the previous league, and so I'm running the same list back. Trying to record another league. Um, yeah, because I know that generally it's more enjoyable to watch the live commentary. It'd definitely be really sweet if I just happened to 5-0 again, like I did that time with the previous list, where I was kind of doing the same thing. I just wanted to record a match or record a league with the same list I just 5-0'd with. And then I ended up 5-0ing again. I have to imagine that's going to be quite the exception rather than the norm, but I will take it if that happens. But I've been liking Forgotten Cave. The theory here is, well, first of all, just by way of explanation, like the reason why I thought to even play Forgotten Cave was that I've been playing Spikefield Hazard in a number of different builds, and I've noticed that actually lands coming into play tapped are really not a problem for this deck. They're really not a problem almost at all. Every once in a while, they might slow me down a little bit. The only way they really hurt is if I, for example, have three prowess creatures that don't have haste, and I can only deploy two on. I can only deploy two by turn 2 because I have to play a tap land somewhere in between. But otherwise, it's generally not that big of an issue because Swissbeer even has haste, so it's usually not that big of a deal if we deploy that one turn later. Sometimes I even wonder if maybe being forced to play a little slower may even help somewhat. Of course, it's always good to have options, so that's not a good thing in the abstract. I mean, it's not a good thing you could say, period. But there's something to be said sometimes about taking a turn off, and it might take your opponent off of a turn to productively use their mana. I mean, it's just to say that being a turn slower and playing something is not always the biggest problem. And I just generally think because this deck plays so many 1-mana spells, like almost the entire deck. I mean, basically the entire deck, other than Pyromancer and Bonecrusher Giant, are 1-mana spells or spells that can be cast for 1 mana given the right conditions. Light Up the State specifically. Oh yeah. Also, I hope that the MTGO sounds are not on anymore. I don't know why they were on last time. I've got my volume mixer up here, and the Magic the Gathering sounds are turned all the way off. I'm not hearing them. I thought I wasn't hearing them before, but maybe maybe they weren't turned all the way off on the mixer. But anyway, hopefully they're off now. But so basically, one of the things that I like about Forgotten Cave as opposed to the Horizon lands is that we've got these new shadow decks running around, particularly ones running that new Scourge of the Skycleaves, if that's how you pronounce it. The new demon shadow type creature that it's like starts off as a 2020, or I should say it starts off as a 0/0, I guess, but like its power and toughness get larger basically for each for I forget how to describe it, but the one that kind of like it's like a 2020 sort of that gets -20, but it gets like negative. It's more powerful generally the lower both you and your opponent's life total are. You can look it up. I think it's Scourge of the Skycleaves. So maybe look it up right now here, actually. Scourge of the... yeah, here it is. One of the first ones that comes up. Yeah, so its power and toughness are each equal to 20 minus the highest life total among players. So the point here is that having lands that damage me actually is very surprisingly painful. I mean, it's always painful, but before this card was printed, even against burn, it usually wasn't the end of the world to take a couple points of damage early on. Or I mean, well, and against burn, it's always painful. So that's also a benefit to Forgotten Cave, is that every no way, no two ways about it. Every life point was always viable in the burn matchup. But here, even beyond the burn matchup, now we have to be concerned about every single life total, because if I just tap a Horizon Land 3 times, this can come down as a 3/3. If I tap it 4 times, it can come down as a 4/4, and at that point, only Flame Slash can really cleanly deal with it. And I've had games with the Horizon Lands where I felt like I couldn't tap the Horizon Land like all game, basically, because I was worried about turning on Scourge of the Skycleaves. A big part of that matchup is actually basically trying to keep your life total at 20 as long as possible. Force them to have to use a lightning bolt or two on your life total instead of on your creatures, and the more you can amass a big creature army, the more it makes it both more difficult for them to attack with Scourge if they ever get it down, and also more difficult for you to do a big rush attack and attack through, a couple of these shadow type creatures. I found that if I can keep my life total at 20 as long as possible, if I can not take any damage, it can be kind of challenging for them to both reduce their own life total low enough to turn on actual shadow, and my life total enough to turn on the new shadow. We'll see if it stays that way, but in that regard also, if we run into the matchup, maybe I'll show the new tech. But the new idea is I'm actually bringing in 4 Blood Moons in that shadow matchup, even the red-black version, which Moon doesn't actually really cut them off of anything most of the time, except that first of all, they almost always play Luris, and actually cutting them off Luris is kind of big, because buying back just 1 Death Shadow or 1 Scourge is actually a very big game for them. So completely turning off that is actually pretty nice. Also, sometimes they play Kroxa. I don't think that's the norm, but when they do play Kroxa, Blood Moon also more or less, let's just say that they either don't run 2 basic swamps, or they very rarely fetch for them. And it's the same dynamic as traditional Death Shadow decks. They almost never fetch basics for the most part, because they really, as long as we don't attack them or damage them basically at all, besides maybe poking with a Lava Dart or poking with 1 creature attack to turn up line at the stage for reduced cost here and there, essentially, as long as we don't reduce their life total as much as possible, then they essentially have to do a lot of work to bring down their life total, which means they have to fetch shock quite a bit in order to turn on their shadows and be able to deploy them, especially if they wanted to play them out of Lightning Bolt or even Firebolt range, which is actually very advisable for them to do. If they deploy it within Firebolt range, it might as well, in this deck, it might as well be not deploying it at all, or even worse, because then they lose it forever. So what I'm trying to make is that Blood Moon actually can be pretty valuable, both because, number one, every once in a while you do actually catch even the red-black version without any swamp, just because they're so heavily incentivized to fetch shock so much. Most of the time, though, they will be able to fetch exactly one swamp, I've noticed. And one of the main reasons why is because they usually have a 1 uncracked fetch land open. It's just a nice luxury that a deck that wants to attack its own life total has, is they don't have to crack all their fetch lands. They can crack as needed. So, and I wonder, they might not even run a second swamp, actually, because I think there may have been times where they've had 2 uncracked fetch lands, but of course not all fetch lands can fetch exactly swamp. I could be wrong about that, but anyway, usually they've got like a 1 untapped fetch land in my experience, just sitting around, and usually they'll crack that for a swamp in response to a Blood Moon. But the point is, cutting them off of double black can turn off Luris, it can turn off Kroxa, and most importantly, they're stuck at whatever life total they're basically at, and from that point onward, after Blood Moon resolves, we're in control of their life total, essentially, not them. That's actually quite surprising, and it's hard to explain exactly like how that affects the game in a very positive way. Hopefully there's a game I run into where I can deploy a Blood Moon, and I can kind of walk through what exactly happens and how that helps. But the gist of it is that we actually have a superior long game to the shadow decks. I know it's hard to believe. People look at a red deck and they assume that it wants to end the game as soon as possible, and it doesn't really have a late game. That might be true for a number of different red decks, maybe even the vast majority of red decks, especially red decks that can kill relatively quickly, like this deck can, throughout Magic's history. But that's not exactly true with this deck at all. I fully believe this deck actually has a far superior late game plan. I've noticed that when the game goes long, when it stretches out, these shadow decks typically they end up with a lot of lands in play, but other than Kolaghan's Command and Lurrus, which, you know, again, gets cut off usually by Blood Moon, they don't really have a lot of actual sources of recurring card advantage. And sure, Kolaghan's Command is one of the best sources of card advantage that you can get. It's ultimately only 4 copies of a card, but we've got Firebolt, we've got Lava Dart. They don't usually play a lot of 1 toughness creatures, though, so it's usually not exactly card advantage. But we've got Firebolt, we've got Bone Crusher Giant, we've got Light Up the Stage, and most importantly, we've got Seasoned Pyromancer. And once we start chaining these, that can be quite problematic for them. And even Obosh, which, unless they play some clean removal spell, oftentimes they have to use two lightning bolts in order to kill. Anyway, so maybe that's enough deck tech, but I like the way Forgotten Cave it's similar to the Horizon Lands. It can be pitched later in the game for extra cards, but you don't have to take damage off of it, and I just find that the coming into play tapped is really not that big of a deal, and hopefully we'll see that play out here. I also would like to say that Forgotten Cave is actually far superior when you have a Blood Moon down, because you can't cycle the Horizon Lands under a Blood Moon, but you actually can cycle Forgotten Cave. So that's pretty nice. You know, I am foregoing playing Spikefield Hazard. You just really can't play 8 come into play tap lands. I also could be playing a one of Castle Embereth again, but I'm a little hesitant to play 5 lands that might come into play tapped. Every once in a while, Castle Embereth came into play tapped back in the day when I played it. But one of the things is that if I even had like a Horizon land in Castle Embereth, usually only 1 land coming into play tap wasn't that big of a deal. But I've already got 4 of these coming into play tapped. And another way I forgot to mention, sometimes Forgotten Cave does screw you over, is if you've got like multiple coming into play tapped. Usually 1 is a-okay and not that big of a deal, but if you've got multiple coming into play tapped, that can be an issue. It's not been an issue that has made me consider giving it up, because whenever I cycle it, it feels like it makes a huge difference in promoting my ability to win. But yeah, Castle just seems like it could increase the possibility of having to play multiple lands tapped turn after turn, and at that point you may be coming close to forfeiting. So, you know, well, let's see how this goes. I'm excited to show how this runs. It's more or less the same kind of idea. I don't know if I'm ever actually going to do it actually, but one interesting idea that I've been sort of like considering possibly doing is Blood Moon has been so good that I've been thinking maybe to move 2 copies in the main, maybe increase my mountain count by 2, and then maybe include 2 more Kozilek's Return, although I generally find 2 Kozilek's Return is quite good enough in a way. I don't know that I actually need more, but plus Flame Slash has actually been very helpful. But it's really actually just sneaking a couple Blood Moons into the main might actually not be bad. We can always pitch them with Seasoned Pyromancer. Anyway, I'm going to run back this list. I actually a lot of times have a lot of experimental ideas. I've actually not tried all my experimental ideas I've had, but that's just one I wanted to share. And also, only reason I'm playing 14 snow-covered mountains and 2 non-snow-covered mountains, it's solely because I want to get a feel for whether or not this deck could benefit for having 2 more Horizon lands, or having 2 Horizon lands in addition to these Forgotten Caves. I've been keeping track of whenever I've drawn the non-snow covered mountain. I mean, it's probably better to run snows anyway. It's so marginal. I really like the art on the unhinged lands, so whatever, you know, come at me if that's just a little bit too less of a spike of an issue. But no, it's okay. I mean, plus, you know, let's just be honest. This art is just like not as good as the non-snow covered art. In fact, you know, for that reason, I'm going to make it the other way around. Yeah, I know. The snow-covered land. My reasoning was the snow-covered lands have a bigger chance of throwing the opponent off guard. But yeah, sometimes I click back and forth from decks just to make sure they register. It's weird, but every once in a while a card that I changed didn't register. So I usually find if I click back and forth, it makes sure that it went through. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how everybody else feels, but I absolutely adore this mountain art. So much so, it's one of the only arts that might tempt me away from playing the unhinged John Avon lands. This is I just really like this. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let's run this through. You know what I might try next time, though, and I also just wanted to share this quick so I don't forget. No, not Keldon Marauders. Those were quite a blast back in the day here. This is kind of like Red's Fairy Conclave of sorts. Sometimes it can even control the board. Yeah, Keldon Megaliths. Because the thing is, we're already incentivized to be Hellbent to maximize the advantages of a Seasoned Pyromancer. The problem is this only comes online so late in the game. Usually, it takes so long to actually turn on. Plus, it's just a regular mountain under Blood Moon, which again, Forgotten Caves is one of the big draws. And of course it also doesn't get the benefit from Obosh because this isn't an odd-covered card. But, I have played this in the past in some, like, mono-red burn-ish type builds, and can be surprisingly good, believe it or not. I'd be willing to give it a try. Another card I've actually thought, because now that I realize that I can accommodate tap lands, I'm actually thinking a lot of different possibilities. Another one is Hit 2 Encampment. Basically, this is, in fact, the Red Fairy Conclave. We will see. It might be better to just be able to have a man land whenever you need it. Also being able to... Generally, because poking at Planeswalkers is just so good. I don't know. There's a whole world of possibilities. But hey, I just 5-0 with a Forgotten Cave list. I like the way Forgotten Cave... I think it... a lot of times it may just be better to just dig for another card. Anyway, it's enough rambling from me. I just wanted to share things that are on my mind and this new, and essentially this old list, but just with this one change and explain it. Let's keep track of now this 2 snow-covered mountains and see if maybe they would be better off as Horizon lands. I don't think we need it, but it is worth noting that we can actually accommodate probably up to 6, maybe even 8, and we might even be able to play 4 Horizon lands, but at that point, between lands coming into play tapped and damaging me, it might just be too much. But we could probably accommodate at least 2 Horizon lands, as long as we don't necessarily have to tap them too many times. But anyway, alright, enough of that. Let's go.